Good evening and welcome to For the Record. We've got an exciting show lined up for you tonight. Our guest tonight is the coach of the Flying Fijians, John McKee, on the back of a great show, a great performance by our team at the Rugby World Cup. Of course, some disappointments about how our stint at the World Cup ended, but the team itself did greatly. There's accolades flowing in from fans here in Fiji and internationally. So over the next hour or so, we'll be talking to John about what he's taken away from the World Cup and what we can expect in the future. John, thank you very much for being on the show. And first off the bat, congratulations to you on the team, on a job very well done. Also, may I introduce our panelist tonight, Ali Kimbia. He is going to be with us on the show as part of the panel, asking some questions of John. Now, the one thing from the opening game that a lot of fans picked up, and I personally picked up, was that it seemed as if Fiji was getting the harsher decisions from the referee and the television match official being repeatedly involved in the match. Fiji-England match, a bit of a guinea pig for TMO and how the entire World Cup would pan out. What did you take away from that game?
Oh, look, I think that on reflection of the World Cup, that the match officials are under a lot of pressure, just as the players are, and I'm sure there'll be some reviews done around that. But certainly, the big occasion, I think it can affect the match officials as much as it does the players.
Looking back, of course, there are a lot of lessons that you have learned and the players have learned. But what would you do differently in 2019?
Look, the pleasing thing about our program really is that in our whole preparation from the New Zealand Maori through, and I look back, there's nothing I'd say, we didn't do that and we should have done it, or we would do something different. I think there's a couple of areas we could sharpen up on, but I think overall our program was pretty good in the terms of the balance between the match program through the PNC and the New Zealand Maori, and then our training camp back here in Fiji to really top our fitness up. I think all that really paid off for us in our Rugby World Cup performance.
Ali?
Yes, Ed, the from Flying Fijians coach, Mr. McKee, you've mentioned that there are some areas of concern. Some areas of concern in regards to the developments that are taking place in the country. Do you believe that there is a major concern in terms of taking developments to the rural areas?
Oh, look, I wouldn't say major concern, but I think it's certainly, that there's a lot of things that we need to address, and from my position as head coach and as a director of rugby across our Warriors and under 20s program particularly, but reaching down to the under 18s as well. Yeah, I definitely see a need to get out to the rural areas, out to the outer islands with our programs, because that's where our players come from, and if we can get to them at a young age, identify our best players at a young age, but also help the local coaches understand the modern game and the requirements of the game, and spread the message that way, that it'll really help our development. It will help players coming through the pathway and help us get younger players into the Warriors particularly, so they get really good grounding, which can be a launch pad for them to represent the Flying Fijians. I've already discussed at Rugby House some plans around myself and getting Alan Muir across around about Christmas time and in December and also in January to run clinics around the requirements of the game, the Fiji style of game, what core skills do we need, but also to have Alan working on some scrum clinics. I think on the back of the Rugby World Cup, all the young front rows in the country, I hope they're very motivated and finally they have an identity, because I think we haven't had a real scrum culture here before. So on the back of the Rugby World Cup, we want to develop that scrum culture and get the front row and the tight five clinics going. And it's not just a matter of getting Alan up here. I mean, he can only be here so many days a year. It's working with some local coaches, identifying some local coaches to become scrum coaches out in the different regions and provinces, and then they can work with our players, our up and coming players and our provincial players on an ongoing basis.
There's a lot of positives that we can pick on the team itself and the performance, but let's look at the pool of death. The odds from day one were stacked against us, England and Wales and Australia. the way that we handled these games and the way that Fiji handled itself, there was no doubt left that we had improved. But you must have heard from fans about how we felt that the Fiji team was not being given a fair chance on the ground, on the day, during the games. We had 3 players cited following on from the game. There were so many penalties issued against us as compared to the other teams, Tier 1 teams, who had not had so many penalties. And it seemed to us, we may be biased, but it seemed to us that we weren't getting a fair treatment.
Look,
You'll have to be diplomatic, but I want to get really honestly your opinion of how the team was treated on the ground on the day.
Look. I think that's the game we play. A lot of those areas, it's not black and white. It's not like a tennis game where the ball's either in or out. And around the ruck area, there's interpretations around the way the game's refereed. For us, there are a few decisions where we're open to a lot of discussion, let's say, and certainly we went through the channels and discussed with the referees' authorities, and you can't change things retrospectively, but hopefully it helps the way the game's refereed going forward. But for us, there are also other areas where I would call avoidable penalties. We gave away some silly penalties. Our own discipline. Allowed the opposition to get into position to score points. I mean, particularly against Australia, I thought 2 penalties there very avoidable. Kicking the ball on the ground and a high tackle. You can avoid those. From those penalties, Australia, kick for touch and score off a driving line out. I mean that's at the end of the day, that was the winning and losing of the game. I mean, there's other things in the game, but we did a lot of very, very good things in all of those 3 games, but we did let ourselves down in just some vital areas. And in games at that level, and when they're so competitive, I mean, we talk about a game of inches. It's the little things that count.
And on that note, we will take a break. That's the end of our first segment. We'll be right back. Pulunaka, and welcome back to the show. We're speaking with the Chief Executive of the Water Authority of Fiji, Mr. Petai Ravai, about the prolonged dry season and conservation of water. Mr. Ravai, when we talk about conservation, I mean, I don't suppose it's just people in the affected areas who need to be taking on these conservation measures and using water wisely. Is this message going out to all other areas in Fiji?
Absolutely. We want to take this message to everyone, and especially those of us who live in the urban centers who take this for granted. If we can, change the way we use water in terms of using it conservatively, because it's the same source that we use to fill our trucks to take it to the rural areas. So, the longer we can sustain this source so that it takes us through this prolonged dry spell, then we can, cut this water from these same sources. For example, Waila treatment plant, that source is feeding half of Suva. But if we need to cut water to Naitasiri and Tailebu and the outskirts of the urban centers around Suva, we'll get that water that's been treated from Waila treatment plant. So if the people in the urban centers can, save a bit and minimize wastage, there'll be more to go around, basically.
How are your water sources coping? Are you still receiving rain in all your catchment areas?
Yes, like I said, the major water sources are not affected or not critical yet. So that's a good sign. And already we're seeing people are coming back to us and, asking more questions on how they can assist. They're already asking for water tanks assistance. We already talking this through with the commissioners, if there could be, tanks placed at strategic locations in rural areas to help them, with their needs.
There are lots of conservation measures that we can take as responsible citizens. But I mean, generally, very quickly, what are some of the tips that you're giving people on these road shows?
All right. Yeah. One main thing is 2/3 of water we use is in the shower, or is in the washroom. So if we can manage that, there's going to be a huge impact. We're also telling them, take shorter showers. If you have a 1 liter, if you have a bottle, fill it up with water and place it in your cistern. You could save up to 1 liter of water every time you flush. Because every time you flush, you use about 6 liters of water. So if you can save 1 liter every time you flush by placing a simple thing like a filled bottle of water inside the cistern, it should save water. Brushing your teeth, like you said, use a cup. Don't turn on the tap. Fill it up with a cup and brush your teeth with it. Some people like to wash their cars, even during these times. We are encouraging them to use a bucket rather than a running hose. So these are the little things that we can all do as responsible citizens of this country to conserve our water usage. When
you go out onto these roadshows, which areas are you targeting? I mean, you must have a schedule.
Yeah, we do have a schedule. We started on the 16th of September in Suba, and we went to Nosori, Singatoka, Nandi, Lotoka, and this week we just completed Ba. Next week we'll be moving on to Tabu and Rakiraki, and then we're finishing off with Lambasa and Sabu Sabu. So it's the major urban centers that we are going through now, but nevertheless, as a result of these visits, we've had numerous requests from the advisory councillors and the Turangani Koros to take it further down. So we're planning that as well. So mainly we started with urban centers, but as a result of this, we've now arranged meetings with the villages and the settlements where the advisory councils are representing. So it's a good program.
A lot of people would say that the Water Authority is being reactive, waiting so many months that have passed by, with the dry spell prolonging even more, and people being in a dire situation before you decided to act.
I don't think that's correct. I think we've been very proactive in this regard. We've sent out advisory notices in the papers. We've put out ads. We've invested in marketing this message out in the various media outlets. So even before it's become critical, we've gone out and we are starting to talk to people now. So it's and this has been planned very well in advance before it really hits home. But also on that regard, we've also invested in new and bigger pumps in our major pump stations to ensure if we do reach critical levels, we can at least pump more water to the treatment plants rather than having just 1 or 2 pumps running. So these are also investments that we've done to be on the standby. For example, the Waimanu pump station, previously, we couldn't run all 4 pumps. But now we put in investments that will enable us to do that. And we're not at the critical level yet, but if we get there, we'll be able to run 4 pumps to supply Tamabua and the 165,000 people that are supplied from the plant. That is in our major urban centers. And like I said, these same sources are being used to fill the water in the trucks and transport them to the rural areas. So if we at the urban centers can, sort of manage our usage and minimize wastage, there'll be a lot of water more to spread or to cut to our brothers and sisters who are living in the peripherals of the urban centers.
When you do supply water to these affected areas, you're basically saying it's for your everyday use. What can the Water Authority do in terms of the needs of farmers for their farms and their crop?
Well, at this point in time, we are just supplying water, again, just for the human basic needs, so to speak. The agricultural issue is, it requires perhaps a bigger national approach to this in terms of irrigation and, the agriculture sector. I'm sure they are working on this aspect as well. We, Water Authority of Fiji, we are supplying water for the people, really. It's not to do with agriculture or for the animals or for farming. We're supplying to their homes for their basic needs, basically. The agriculture sector has a different approach. because they need to do irrigation and maybe some dams to be constructed. But that's the agriculture sector to look after.
Okay, and with that, we've come to the end of another segment. We'll be back after this very short break. Welcome back to the show. We're speaking with Moses Mbulitavu, the opposition MP and SODELPA member, about his opinion piece with regards to Fiji's chiefly system. Mr. Mbulitavu, let's tie in your research with you being a member of the Social Democratic Liberal Party and the fact that your party leader happens to be a high chief, Rotemu Mukepa, the Rokutu Indriketi. Now, what you're saying here directly conflicts with her appointment as a chief. I mean, has this sort of been the catalyst for what's going on within SODELPA right now, including yourself and questions over leadership?
There is nothing wrong, Edwin, if a chief wants to join politics and become a leader of a political party. What really needs to be done is the adjustment of a particular leader into democracy. The principle of democracy, the culture of democracy comes with consultation and all that comes in. And once chiefs are citizens too, and they are qualified to run for elections, they qualified to lead a political party. But again, as I've said, once they have a vision and they understand the philosophies of democracy, that's when they will know that democracy, it comes from the people to the leader. Whereas in the one way, normally it comes from a elite group of advisors, and from the chief it goes downwards. And that is the difficulty that most of our chiefs are facing when they come into politics.
Take me back to the beginning. How did all of this change within SODELPA, which you instigated, mind you, for a very long time, and which has now been taken on board? What triggered this? What got you to act?
Edwin, I think everything is before the investigating committee. But again, what I've said earlier could be the reason that we were not talking a lot. And I think we need leaders who will hear our voice in a democratic way. And once we do that, and our leaders understand that the atmosphere in every parliamentary democracy has to work that way, I think it could not happen.
Do you believe we should separate an individual's chiefly roles from their political role? Not to say that they should give up their title, they can keep their title, but once they join a political party, they have to have a clear line of demarcation.
Right. There has to be a clear line of demarcation on their traditional role and politically. For example, if a chief member of parliament, sitting member of parliament, and wants to go to a provincial council meeting, once you go in the provincial council meeting, and you cannot be taking your ideologies of political ideologies in the meeting, because at that level only government programs are discussed, and the very presence of yourself in that particular meeting, raises the question that this is a political figure coming into a provincial meeting with issues that they are standing for in regards to what they stand for in their manifesto, group rights and everything. But in that case, it becomes a problem.
Aren't you worried that you might be ostracized by your own party for all of this, questioning traditional leadership and questioning party leadership?
Well, this is my opinion as a private person. Questioning whether chiefs should be in politics or should be in leadership, it's an opinion. And I think there is nothing in the policy of the party which says that that chiefs are to be political leaders of the party, and that we are to always have a chief as our leader. There's nothing as such. So it's an open thing. People have to apply with their merit-based and everything. And if a chief is qualified and has got a vision and can lead, has influence in regards to modern day politics, then considered by the selection committee that is the best to take the party forward, there's no problem with it.
But not to be appointed as party leader because of the influence that a chief has through their traditional appointment.
To be merit-based, but not through traditional connection and other influences that makes a particular chief, gives him elevates his or her position to become party leader because of her status.
How do you think supporters of SODELPA will take your opinions? Given that over the course of 1 hour or so, we've been talking about how the chiefly system needs to change with the times and how the people, the Vanua, have more power over their future and what direction they take their lives into. Given that, how do you think these changes that are happening within SODELPA will affect supporters of the party?
All right, Edwin. The electoral system that we have, even in a village, take for example a village, you don't know who's voting who. Who's voting who? Even the chief comes in and says that this is the party I support, and people should support my party. People think otherwise because they now are at liberty to compare and contrast and for them to make their own decision. Even when the church minister comes in, I support this party because of this, it's in line with this particular theology. But again, people have other ideas. People assess things on who brings them satisfaction, who brings them service. And if we continue into that, if chiefs continue into that way that we think that the people still think like us and will always do whatever we say, at this time, I think the last election gave a clear reflection of what has changed. And we cannot be in that mindset for now. We really need to move and try to assess what are the taste of the Vanua now. Where people want, people are prioritizing things, and what their areas of needs are. You have to know the people now.
Okay, we have to take another break. When we come back, our last segment for this evening.
Welcome back to For the Record. We're talking about suicide prevention. Minister, you spoke about some of the root causes of what exactly, and what are they?
What we see, the kinds of counseling that is happening in our schools, particularly in the urban areas, we know that a lot of those issues that students are raising is because of lack of parental engagement, lack of parental support, arising out of, in particular, broken marriages or single parents. We did a quick survey of our urban schools, and we found a very startling figure in terms of the students coming out of single parent or broken marriage. For example, in Singotoka, amongst the primary schools in the urban area, 12.2% of the children originate from single parent or broken marriage. Secondary school, 10.7%. Lotoka Secondary School's largest, 34.5%. In the Tavu area, primary school 17.7%, whereas secondary school 15%. Super primary schools 17.8%. They come from single parent.
But I mean, single parenting doesn't necessarily mean that a child will become suicidal. I mean,
what we noted when the students bring some problems, and then the teachers when they dig deeper, they find that they're not given that kind of support, love and care at home. That is a major issue. Parents not spending quality time with the child, or allowing the child to talk to them, or allowing the child to share with them.
a lot of
This
parents,
is
a lot of parents would argue with you that they are single parents, a single mother raising a child, a single father raising a child, and saying that they are doing a good job. They
Good,
are looking after their child, and their child is not.
I agree.
Is not heading down the wrong track.
I agree. You're talking about the lot. I'm talking about very high, large proportion of them. I'm talking about a small but significant proportion of parents who are not spending quality times, and this is
because
becoming an
because
issue.
of their own issues,
Own
be it
issues,
marital or
disputes, work schedule. This is becoming an issue now, which never used to exist before. Now, coupled with this, coupled with the kind of disengagement with the child and parent, quality time as well, you have got these other factors such as social media, Facebook interaction, movies. This is actually taking the child away from the core business, which is study, as well as luring the child into activities which could harm them. So this is becoming an issue. So we are worried. The kind of complaints are coming, and if you go to I don't want to name schools, and you talk to the counselors, they'll tell you the kinds of problems children are bringing to them, and a lot of them are linked to children originating from homes where parents have separated, or parents are not giving quality time.
And how does one begin this engagement? How do you get parents engaged? How does one get a community engaged, Andy?
I think for me, if I had to campaign on behalf of mental health and to to bring suicide more into the forefront, I think what we should establish in Fiji, which is what I don't think we have at the moment, is respite centers. Now in New Zealand, when I went through my depression and I was coming out of my attempted suicide, I was given the option of a respite center. Now this is where you actually go. It's a home where they provide you with counselors, and you take a break from the problems that you're having at home. Like if you, for example, if you're having single parent issues, or just normal issues at home with family or friends, you go into a respite center and stay there for maybe 1 or 2 days, where you get counseled, where they offer you support and they show you the love that you lack. So I think that's what we need to do in Fiji, is get respite centers built, and in our main centers, and as well as other rural areas around Fiji.
How do we get parents involved, Minister?
Every parent has to say, at least I'll spend half an hour in the evening sitting down with the child, asking the child, how did your school go today? What did you learn today? Did you have any problems today? And for child in primary school, try to read a story. I do that. I've got my second child is in year 2. Whenever I'm in Suva and I'm at home in the evening, before he goes to bed, I make a point of reading one story to him. And I ask him, how was your school? He will dodge around, but at least I spend that little time, and that little time matters to him. When you read a story out to him, you'll see how he'll move around and get all over you. He gets engaged. If every parent, by duty, spends at least half an hour directly, one-to-one, talking to the child and allowing the child to share their issues or how they did in the school that day, it'll make a huge difference.
For people who have been through problems, who've had suicidal tendencies, for you personally, did you at any point face stigma and discrimination? Because we did a show last week and we heard how not just people who harm themselves, but their families as well have to face up to questions about what we did wrong, or whose fault was it. Did you at any time come across this?
In New Zealand, I came out public because I actually, there was a documentary that was done after I came through depression, and I survived my attempted suicides, and I was working in the fashion industry, and we all know that the fashion industry is very critical. I, however, got a lot of support from the fashion industry and New Zealanders as a whole. It was when I came to my own country, home, that when I shared in one of a presentation that I did, was when I felt stigmatized by my very own people that I call fellow Fijians. So the stigma is here. I think the reason why there's stigma is because there hasn't been that much of, people haven't been educated on how to deal with someone that has been through mental health issues. and on how they should be taught on how to, show support to someone that has been through those issues.
Do you think, I mean, I don't know, I get this perception that people think if you talk about suicides, people will start committing suicides. If you bring up the issue, then you're planting a seed in someone's mind.
I mean, we got this last Friday, to be a day for national discourse on suicide, and we got 90% support for it. But there were some people who made such demoralizing comments that, they're going to now talk about suicides to the children. Look, I mean, we are trying our best to see how children are alert about these things. Children are not tempted by anyone to go and push them around and do something that will destroy the entire future. And here people are saying, at times it's a bit demoralizing and depressing, but we are focused. We want our children. Gone are those days when we used to see these topics as a taboo and we didn't want to talk to this. I always say to our teachers that 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, the model that was used for growth and development of a child is no longer relevant. Now the model is different. We need to talk to our children. We need to talk to like a friend, treat them like a friend, and openly ask them certain questions that 3 decades or 4 decades ago, we treated it as a taboo. We didn't want to talk to them about it. This is a different world. You are not talking to them. Someone else may be talking to them. You need to understand it. They may be listening or watching it somewhere else, in a TV or Facebook or whatever. It's better you talk to them and clarify their doubts.
Okay, and we will take another break. We'll be right back.
Bulumanaka, and welcome back to the show once again. Before the break, I was going to pose a question to our guest, Humphrey Chang. Humphrey, the question that I had wanted to ask was whether the workforce has a majority of people who come in inspired to work, who've graduated, who've found a job, and who over months and years continue to have that passion to be productive.
Okay. Yeah, the quick answer to that is that unfortunately in Fiji, I think there is a provision where there's career guidance, counseling going on. But, a lot of people come to work not because they have chosen a career, but because they want to work and get some money. I think that's not the way to go, because, people should decide at the early stage what they want to do in life. And, when I was studying abroad, this counseling takes place in a technical college in a very good way, and you can go there and you talk to them and they'll tell you, well, what do you want to really do in life, what your parents do you want to follow your father's footstep or not, and so on, and they get some idea what they want to do in life. All right? But here, unfortunately, because there's a lack of it, there's people just go in and try and get any job just because they want some money, they want bread and butter on the table.
Dr. Wa, can education, can tertiary training cater for inspiration to work?
I think what Humphrey is saying is correct. One of the things we are in the process of putting together is what we're calling the tertiary education strategy for Fiji for the next 5 years. And one of the things we are noticing there is to ensure that the student is at the center of all of this. And the point that, again, Mr. Chang talked about is we find too many people coming into institutions doing work, doing studies, and at the end, on the final year, trying to work out what they're going to do. As I talked about quick and dirty research, we did one this year, just before graduation. We went to one of our major universities and said to the graduating students, what are you going to do when you finish this degree? More than 80% of them didn't know what they were going to do. And that shocked the life out of us. We were saying, if these guys who have finished all of our primary and secondary school, finishing a degree and are going to graduate tomorrow, don't even know what job they're going to pick up, it's frightening. And so in the tertiary strategy, what we're saying is the students must be first. The students' interest must know what their interest is, exactly what he was saying. And and be able to be open to the various pathways that are available for them. So, people in all the different sectors of our society, from the ones who are not so strong and the ones who are very strong in terms of different skill areas, they should know what are the possible pathways. Currently, it's not clear enough. And one of the things we're trying to do in this strategy is say to our institutions, you must write your profile. You are an institution to do these kinds of things. Your target group for our country is these types of students. Come here, we will take you along these ways. Come here, these are the kinds of things. If you are interested in being a hairdresser, we're going to take you that way. If you're interested to do this, we're going to take you that way. And
So,
not everybody going to become doctors and the white-collar jobs types of things.
Is it that I'm trying to get my head around this, as you say, and Humphrey, you can step in at any time. But is it that they're getting into higher education, getting whatever courses they are, and then simply saying, okay, at the end of all this, I'll see what I can end up with?
Yes, all day yesterday, just to give you an example, all day yesterday I was doing interviews for jobs at our office. And when people came in, I said to them, one of the questions was, what will you do in the next 5 years? Just about every one of them said, I want to do a further degree. And I said, why? So that I can get a better job.
Mm.
And I'm saying, okay, you sure if you're going to do another degree, you're going to get a better job? Yeah. That's the kind of perception that people have in society. You get a certification, you get a better job. But that's not what industry is saying. If you're competent, you get a better job.
Yeah, the other aspect is that, following on from what you are asking, is that there's too many people who want to get a certificate or a diploma, not for employment here in Fiji, but to take it abroad. And there's a lot of people who go through what is now known as a trade test. And if you get trade test number 1, the highest level, you got no trouble getting job in Australia, New Zealand, And so this is where we are going to lose a lot of people when they do go to these trade tests and other certificates that they may secure in the future.
But then, market forces, market demands, if that's the case, then shouldn't the industry step up and pay better?
Well, we are doing that. The industry is trying to do that, but this is a small economy. Fiji is a small economy. We can't be paying just as much as what was, they pay about $15 an hour. I got 2 or 3 of my workers who are now working in New Zealand. One of them, a lady, who came to us without any knowledge. She does not know any knowledge. She is now the assistant manager in Repco in New Zealand. Another one migrated about 18 months or so ago. He came back to Fiji twice. We can't even go to Melbourne for a trip because the fare is so much. But he can come back to Fiji so many times. But he now is earning something like $15 an hour, Australian dollar, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And so, Dr. Wah, how does that compare with the challenges that the industry faces in not having the right trained or right competencies in the workforce? The people who do have the right skills move overseas.
Well, I think there's 2 things. In the past, the government used to be always worried about people moving overseas. I don't think we're too worried about that now because remittances are one of our biggest, in fact, the second largest foreign exchange income in the country. So we're trying to train as part of that market also. We're not training only for our local market. That's one thing we need to make very clear up front. But at the same time, the cream's going and the others are staying back, and we want to build that up better. So in other developed countries, especially Australia and New Zealand, what they do is they work with people in the workforce. Most of our training that the higher education sector commission is looking at now are pre-service training, if I can talk about that. The major section in the country that's looking after people already there with skills gaps is NTPC. And we're working very closely with them to lift that game also, the kinds of things that Mr. Cheng was talking about in terms of trade skills. But we need to do a lot more of that, a lot more of people who are in the workforce and who have real competency gaps, and lift them up to be able to be more efficient in the job. We're working at how we're going to do recognition of prior learning and do that type of thing. We don't have that in the country. We need to do that and develop some kind of skill for Fiji. We're getting consultants in next month to come in and work with us to try and develop those types of things so that we can move ahead. Sure, we've got a workforce who have a lot of competency issues, but there are also things in place both at the Commission and with industry and the providers to try and move forward. I think government is certainly providing its full force behind the initiatives that we're trying to do.
Okay, and with that, we've come to the end of another segment